more global perspective from Regit and from Miroslav, what could be done, and from also Patrick, what could be done on a global level to advocate and to draw attention to you. So it's very interesting, two sides of the coin. So now even we are a little bit ahead of schedule, which is good. So we'll have a... Oh, hi. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so please...
Take the mic.
Yes.
You have the stage.
Sorry about that.
Thank you. Sorry, I had to sprint a little bit from across the street, so I'm a bit out of breath. Still young, but not in shape as I used to be. I work for the United Nations Environment Program, and I've shared with Miro as part of the World We Want platform. Probably you've heard of the World We Want campaign and the My World as we were designing the SDGs. A lot of youth worldwide involved in the policy making, having their say in what they wanted to see as part of the SDG, as part of the Agenda 2030. And now we have a chance to make it happen. So I think the call is for you guys to join all of the campaigns out there. There are many of them promoting a lot of great things. I, for my part, can recommend the Give Me 5 campaign. It's a call to action in prioritizing public spending for sustainable development and creating awareness of how much, for example, we spend as a global society in military and defense budgets. With only 5% of military and defense budgets, we could actually fund the entire Agenda 2030. And I think that's huge. The other point I would like to bring for you guys today, I know it's been a long day, is the fact that we have the United Nations Environment Assembly, which unfortunately we haven't yet created that much space for youth participation, but we're working with the Office of the Envoy and hopefully with you guys to ensure that the United Nations Environment Assembly, where we will have 160 ministers of the environment from all over the globe getting together to see how we start to implement the Agenda 2030 so that we have your voice there and your ideas, because this is a place where we will talk about solutions, we will share and collaborate, and then use this platform to really translate this global agenda into local action. So thank you so much, Miro, for having me, Glocha, Action Network, and for all of you to listen and share. Thanks.
So thank you very much. And now the floor is open for your comments. We're looking forward to hearing from you what you think.
Yeah, I also have Youngo's responses.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Whenever that's...
Oh, sorry, no, please, sorry about this. Go on.
A very quick note that I'd like to make for question number 1 is a lot of the action that youth are contributing is taking place within higher education institutions, especially if you look in the United States context. We actually have modeled after UNFCCC the ACU-PCC, the American College and University President's Climate Commitment, which I personally worked a lot on as an undergraduate. And that has a trickle effect into the local communities where these are happening, and that's definitely a way that youth are able to contribute as students, and you could even percolate that down into secondary education and down on the line from a bachelor's level. Miro already covered a lot for question number 3, but we definitely need this youth engagement support mechanism, and that's a beautiful segue into the meat of what I'd like to say, which is on question number 6, which is specifically recommendations for how youth can move forward in the UNFCCC context. We did a lot of discussion around this in Paris because it's a constant struggle figuring out how, as young people, are we going to overcome the many challenges to effectively engage in these processes. And some of the creative ideas we came up with, so many countries within that space. Yes, it's a party-driven process, but youth are there. Why couldn't youth have their own dedicated space? The United States has an exorbitant pavilion. Other countries have their lovely pavilions. Why don't young people have a pavilion at the COP? There's really no excuse not to. We could certainly fill that space with many creative presentations, side events, and it would facilitate our engagement in that space. So we're right now working on figuring out what's our proposal look like for that, approaching funders and so forth. But that would be a huge step in the right direction for us. We're also working on a formal submission for the SBI 44, which is coming up. That's on the DOA work program. And that's going to include a lot of these proposals and overlaps, again, with how are we going to engage and mobilize more support. Also in this, we need more youth delegates, official youth delegates with the party badge. We have a few of them. They're great to work with, and they're really indispensable to having the youth voice really make it into the process. And that's probably the largest frustration that we have, is not even getting access. There needs to be some sense of your mouth being, your money being where your mouth is, in the sense of young people need that kind of access. And the Netherlands, Norway, a few countries have them, but there's no excuse, I would say, for every country not to have them. And I'll call out again my own country, United States. What excuse can we make for why we don't have more youth delegates? And that is something, while that proposal is specifically for the UNFCCC, why couldn't we also scale that up with a major group of children and youth and give them more access? And you're then also creating a conduit for these to be official ambassadors who can go at the national level and connect with more of these, for creating more grassroots youth NGOs and organizations, as we should be. Then you're also creating a complementary piece to connect the dots all the way up to, a state, subnational states level, regional level, and then also bring that up to national level and then internationally. Because that's something that the young people are already doing informally, but if we had more resources, if we had some more structure and organization, we could do an even more fabulous job than what we do now as all volunteers who somehow have to find our way to get there. And as a final piece of this, even being able to get to these meetings is the largest barrier, and that's especially so for all of our Global South youth. They don't get their visas on time, they don't have funding to get there. I will say that graciously, the French government worked with Youngo to give us 50,000 euros to provide some scholarships to Global South youth. And we hope that we'll be able to continue that with Morocco for COP22, but that again is only one piece of this. And if we had more official youth delegates bringing programs, finance into this, more grassroots organizations which are providing young people who are educated enough to even understand the acronyms and what is going on in this process. A lot of my own work within Sustain Us, which is a US youth NGO that I've been going to the COPs with, is just taking new people and helping them to digest what this is that we're talking about. And there's a lot of knowledge that those of us in this room take for granted, and someone needs to make that comprehensible to the outside world that we're supposed to be representing and working on behalf of. So those areas of more dedicated facilities for youth at these meetings, and if you pilot that at the COP, maybe you can scale that out to other meetings, other UN processes. If you would have more scholarships to support youth, again, as Focal Point and my Global South colleague Focal Point, we're not funded to do any of this, so it makes it that much more difficult for us to do our jobs and support the whole constituency. So again, some funding for staff and more structure, the Global South scholarships, and finally, again, more youth delegates who can officially get that youth voice. It's very frustrating as the young people that we have to find countries to be our champions. And fortunately, we've been able to do that, and for example, had intergenerational equity recognized in the Paris Agreement. That's the first time in the history of international law that has happened, and it was 3 years of completely voluntary work from young people, but at the final wire, it was a couple of party badge young people and countries who were our member states or member parties of the UNFCCC who were making that happen. So putting those things together, and Youngo and all youth in the international space will be a lot stronger, able to participate.
This is great. More interesting, very interesting discussion, I think. Before we start, I open the floor. I wanted to remind you to sign up if you didn't yet for the sheet with the emails and so on, for the future exchange of information. That would be very useful. And I would like to open the floor for more rich contributions from the audience, because I'm sure you were nodding off during the presentation, so I'm sure you have a lot to say. So please, whoever wants to start. Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. I'm Cecilia Golden from UNESCO. It's nice to see you. So I just want to inform you that in UNESCO we are also organizing youth forums. So in October last year we organized the 9th youth forum entitled Global Young Citizens for Sustainable Development. And that focused in particular on the implementation of the Agenda 2030 and in particular sustainable climate change. And of course a strong focus in the recommendations was of the importance of culture and knowledge and education. And among the 500 participants in the youth forum, 2 were selected, the youth representative from Argentina and from the Philippines, to present the recommendations at COP21. And the recommendations from the youth forum will also be presented at COP22, and at UNESCO's General Assembly, General Conference, it was also presented. And when it comes to knowledge production, I'm working for Management of Social Transformations program, which in particular is focusing on the social dimensions of climate change. Me, myself, I'm not really involved in that part of the program, but what we are doing is to work with social science research organizations, individual researchers, and a lot of partnership with other UN agencies also, and also with Miro. I know that myself, I have never met you, I haven't been working with you before, but we work with social science and other partners to sort of contribute with social science findings to present them to policymakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who would like to contribute? Anyone? Maybe you can share experience of what your organization. Yes, please.
My name is Cleopatra Masinga. I'm from South Africa. I'm a graduate student at Seton Halls. I'm doing diplomacy and international relations. But my undergrad was, I specialized on natural resources management. I was looking at climate change, especially in South Africa. It's quite interesting to hear about the funding. I went to South Africa also, very passionate and very dedicated. When I finished my bachelor's in 2009, I went to South Africa with passion. I started my own environmental organization on climate change, especially on environmental awareness, because in the communities, I'm from a small province called KZN. Most people in developing countries have less knowledge on climate change issues, especially with women and youth. My difficulty at that time, I was so much dedicated because of my thesis and my research. The findings that I came to conclusion was awareness was a critical point at that time. I went back, I finished, I went back to South Africa. The problem was access to funding. The access to funding in developing countries is an issue. The organization was good. I knocked to different offices, doing a lot of presentations. Yes, this is a very good initiative. But okay, now how do we go ahead and make this, a good project, since you can see it. So all I'm saying is access to funding for youth, because I had staff, I had employees.